Hello friends, today we are going to discuss about deduction under chapter 6a. Most of us will have dilemma while filing income tax return. Which type of deductions are applicable, which are not? What are the conditions to claim deduction? If there is any limit specified, what is the limit specified? And so on. So, let us have small discussion on few sections of deduction under chapter 6a. Deduction under Chapter 6a mainly deals with Section 80 and its subsection. In today's session, we are going to discuss about Section 80U, deduction for person with disability, Section 80D, maintenance of disabled dependent, Section 80DDB, treatment for specified diseases, Section 80D, medical treatment. Now let us have small discussion on Section 80U. Deduction for person with disability. First of all, we have to know who can claim this deduction. From the section heading itself, we can come to know that this section is particularly for person with disability. Then, what does person means here? Only individual, and not only individual, he shall be resident in India. That means a resident individual can claim this deduction. Then, what are the types of disabilities covered here? Let me give you examples of disabilities covered here: blindness, leprosy, low vision, autism, mental illness, etc. But make a note that person is suffering with 40% of this disabilities. Then you might be getting a small idea that this section is applicable to a resident individual who is suffering with 40% of the specified diseases. Yes, you are partly correct. But there are some conditions to be fulfilled. First condition is that person has to obtain a medical certificate from the medical authority stating about the disability. After obtaining the certificate, then if the person wants to claim the deduction, then person has to fill a specified form in the assessment year in which he wants to claim the deduction and attach the copy of certificate issued by medical authority in the prescribed form. Third condition is person is not required to produce any bills of expenses or any other evidences incurred for the medical treatment or any other medical expenses. Then there comes a question in your mind: if you don't have to produce any medical bills and all, how will you claim the deduction? How much amount to be claimed and all? So, let us have small discussion on it. In this particular section, there is a flat deduction given. Flat deduction of rupees 1,25,000 is given for the person who is suffering with severe disability of 80%, and rupees 75,000 flat deduction is given for the person who is suffering with other than severe disability. So, let me remind you once again, you don't have to produce any bills for the expenses incurred. You can directly take the flat deduction of rupees 75,000 and 1,25,000. Now, let us have discussion on section 80DD, maintenance of disabled dependent. First of all, we have to understand who can claim this deduction: a resident individual or a HUF for a dependent who is differently abled and completely dependent on such individual or HUF. From the section heading, we can make a note that this section is particularly for the person who is looking after or incurring expenses for the maintenance of dependent. What does dependent mean? In case of individual, dependent means spouse, parents, children, brothers and sisters. In case of HUF, dependent means any member of HUF. There are certain conditions for this section also. person has to incur medical expenses of dependent or incur expenses for rehabilitation or any training purpose for the dependent, or he or she has deposited a certain amount in the scheme of LIC or any other insurance for the maintenance of dependent. But make a note that if dependent has already claimed deduction under section 80U, then this section is not applicable. This section is applicable for the dependent of taxpayer and not the taxpayer himself. This section is almost similar to section 80U. Here also, just like 80U, there is no compulsion in production of medical bills or any other evidences for the expenses incurred. It means that here also there is a flat deduction of rupees 75,000 if the person is having disability other than severe disability, and flat deduction of rupees 1,25,000 having severe disability of 80%. Make a note that there is no compulsion in producing bills but have to incur expenses for the dependent. Now let us have discussion on section 80DDB, treatment for specified diseases. Treatment for specified diseases means any person suffering with specified disease and taking treatment on the same qualifies for claiming the deduction. What does specified diseases mean? Specified diseases like neurological diseases, malignant cancer, chronic renal failure, or hematological disorders, etc., are covered here. Make a note that just mere having of the disease does not qualify you to claim this deduction. You have to take medical treatment for the same. What does person means here? Person means an resident individual or a HUF. So from this you might have got an idea that this section deals with person who is resident individual or a HUF who is suffering with the specified diseases and is also taking the treatment for the same, is eligible for the deduction. Yeah, there are certain conditions. What are the conditions? Let us have a look. If any assessee is suffering with the disease and is incurring the expenditure, can claim the deduction. If any dependent of the taxpayer is suffering with the disease and the taxpayer is incurring the expenditure, then he or she can claim the deduction. What does dependent mean here? In case of individual, dependent means spouse, children, parent, brother, sister. In case of HUF, dependent means any member of HUF. Unlike 80U and 80DD, here there is no flat deduction of the amount given. It means you have to produce bills here. You have to incur the expenses which are actually incurred. Apart from actually incurred expenses, there is another limit prescribed. Let us have look on it. In case of senior citizen and very senior citizen, amount incurred or rupees 1 lakh, whichever is lower. In case of assessee being other than senior citizen, then amount incurred or rupees 40,000, whichever is lower. Let me explain you this with an example. If assessee is incurring rupees 35,000 for the expenses, then he can claim deduction of rupees 35,000, that is amount incurred, or rupees 40,000, whichever is lower. If assessee is incurring rupees 42,000, then he can claim deduction of rupees 40,000, that is amount incurred or rupees 40,000, whichever is lower. That means we can come to a conclusion that rupees 40,000 and rupees 1 lakh are the maximum amount that can be claimed. Let me remind you once again that amount incurred only allows you to claim this deduction, that is actual payment basis. You have to produce bills and incur expenses for this deduction. Now let us have discussion on section 80D, medical treatment. If a person is incurring expenses on medical insurance or any other health plan, then such expenses can be claimed as deduction under this section. But you will be in dilemma whether which type of investment to be done, how to it should be done, and all. So let me give you some mode of investment like medical insurance, central government health scheme, preventive health checkup, making or incurring expenses on super senior citizen. But we have to also understand what does person means here. Person means every individual or HUF. Make a note that every individual, that means both resident as well as non-resident individuals are covered under this section. What does individual mean here? Individual means self, spouse, parent and dependent child. Make a note that here only dependent child is covered, not the independent child. In case of HUF, any member of HUF. There are certain limits specified in this section. Let us have look on it. Assessee being other than senior citizen, following are the limits. If he is expending on himself and family, following is the limit. Other than preventive health checkup, amount incurred or maximum of rupees 25,000 is allowed. For preventive health checkup, amount incurred or maximum of rupees 5,000 is allowed. If assessee is incurring in both other than preventive health checkup and preventive health checkup, maximum limit allowed is rupees 25,000. If assessee is incurring expenses on himself and family along with parents not being senior citizen, then limit allowed is 25,000 for self and family and 25,000 for the parents. These limits are the maximum limit allowed or the expenses incurred, whichever is lower. If incurred for preventive health checkup, expenses incurred or rupees 5,000, whichever is lower. If assessee is incurring in both preventive health checkup as well as other than preventive health checkup, maximum limit allowed is rupees 55,000. If assessee is incurring expenses on self and family along with senior citizen parents, then limit allowed is rupees 25,000 for himself and family and rupees 50,000 for senior citizen parents. Note, this is the maximum limit allowed or expenses incurred, whichever is lower. In case of preventive health checkup, rupees 5,000 or the expenses incurred, whichever is lower. If assessee is incurring in both preventive health checkup or other than preventive health checkup, maximum limit allowed is rupees 80,000. Now let us have look assessee being senior citizen. If assessee is senior citizen incurring expenses on himself and family other than preventive health checkup is rupees 50,000 or the expense incurred, whichever is lower. For preventive health checkup, rupees 5,000 or expense incurred, whichever is lower. Total deduction allowed if assessee is investing in both preventive as well as non-preventive health checkup is rupees 50,000. Assessee being senior citizen and family and also making expenditure for his parents being senior citizen, then limit allowed is rupees 50,000 for himself and family and rupees 50,000 for parents. Make a note that this is the maximum limit allowed. If expenses is incurred, limit allowed or the expenses incurred, whichever is lower. In case of preventive health checkup, rupees 5,000 or the expenses incurred, whichever is lower. If assessee is incurring in both preventive health checkup and other than preventive health checkup, maximum deduction allowed is rupees 1,05,000. Thank you friends for being till end. We will meet in the next video. Have a great time till then.